What we do here at City Light for the teaching part is we do series, which means we take a topic and we kind of lean into that topic for 4 to 6 weeks so that we're not just like scooting all over the place. So for the next month, we're going to be talking about this idea of being someone's miracle. And now, I don't say the word miracle correctly, and I know you probably heard it there. It's miracle, right? When I say miracle, like I'm saying America, and I don't know why, but you're going to have to deal with it this whole series because I've worked for years to correct it and I can't. So be someone's miracle. It just sounds weird. Okay. So I heard this story a long time ago, and it's one of those things, it's like a modern day parable. You've all heard it, okay? And it has always stuck with me because it just is true. So it's the story of this guy who's on this boat, and the boat starts to sink, and he's drowning. Have you heard this one? It's not a joke. It's not a joke. It's like a parable. And so he's going to die, and so he prays to God, and he says, God, save me. God, I know you'll save me. I pray that you would save me. And then someone comes up in one of the life rafts, and there's one more seat in the life raft. And he's like, hey, come on, we've got a seat for you. He says, no, God's going to save me. And a little bit later, he's just like, the ship has totally sunk, and he's just like treading water. And another boat comes by, a boat in the middle of the ocean. And what are the chances, right? You see the guy, and they're like, oh, get in. They throw him a life, one of those circle thingies. And he's like, no, I don't need it. God's going to save me. And then he's really starting to get tired, right? Treading water, he's kind of going under, coming back up. Sharks are circling. I made that part up. That's not in the story. But it sounds more exciting. And then a Coast Guard helicopter flies over, sees him. What are the chances, right? Stops, lowers the thing down, and says, no, it's okay. God's going to save me. And then he dies, right? And he goes to heaven, and he sees God. He's like, God, where were you? He's like, dude, I sent you a life raft, a boat, and a helicopter. What else do you want from me, right? So I heard that story like years ago. I don't know why, but I think about it all the time. And I just think it's so true. Like we pray and we're like, God, do something. And then God does something. We're like, not that. I want you to do what I want you to do. God, I want like a miracle, right? I want a miracle. I want you to do something supernatural that blows my mind. That's like something I've never seen before. And often the way that God works is he works. Well, I mean, one of the Bible verses that we all love is he works in mysterious ways, right? Which is great. We wish he would work in very understandable ways all the time, right? But he often works through people. In fact, much of the story of the Bible, right? And if you're unfamiliar with the Bible, it's a collection of books written over thousands of years that all tell one big story, which is the narrative story of God reaching out to his people and reestablishing relationship with us. And all throughout the story, from Genesis to Revelation, God chooses to work through people. Broken people, messed up people like you and me, right? That's how God works. And so you might think at this point that this teaching is about, right, how we need to learn to let God speak to us through other people. But that's it. We're going to flip that over. I want to talk about how we can be the helicopter, okay? How we can be the life raft, how we can be someone's miracle in their life, that we can be someone's answer to their prayer, that God can use us. And so this month, we're going to talk about 4 different ways for us to do that in the lives of other people. I think it's an intentional position that we put ourselves in life, that we can actually participate in what God's already doing, that we can put ourselves in that place. When we planted the church, like 2 years into planting the church. So we planted the church 6.5 years ago, for those of you who don't know. And about 2 years in, we went through some pretty hard things as a church. And personally, I went to a pretty dark place. So I have dealt with anxiety and panic attacks on and off for the last almost decade now. Oh man, seems like a long time. And so I'm doing much better. Thanks for asking. But so during this time, it was dark, and it was I was wrestling with insecurity. I was wrestling with doubt. I was questioning whether I really should have planted a church. I was questioning even some of my beliefs in the Bible. Like, it was a really dark, difficult time. I was having some panic attacks. I was seeing a therapist and all the good stuff. I was seeing a therapist. I got on some medication. I was seeing some friends that would pray for me. And I have a couple pastors in my life that I have known forever, and they're older than me. And them reached out to me and said, hey, why don't you come up to have lunch with me? And it's Mark Tyndall, actually. He's the pastor of Blue Root Vineyard. And side note, he's coming to teach here January 21st. So that's exciting. All right. But so he called me. I went up there. We spent lunch together in the afternoon talking. And the talk was good. But he also was like, listen, I've been listening to this podcast. And I think it's right where you're at. And so I listened to this podcast, and I'm not going to tell you, I mean, this podcast changed my life. And it was two pastors talking about pastoring in our modern day culture. And it was so encouraging because I felt alone in what I was trying to do in the world and what I believed and what our church was trying to do. And then these two pastors are also authors. And so then I started reading all their books, and their books were exactly what I need. So here's the point. I was praying. If you go back and read my journal, I keep a journal, not daily, but I keep a journal. And I was praying through my journal, like, God, I need help. God, I don't know what to do. God, I'm freaking out. God, did we do the wrong thing? God, do I believe the wrong thing? And God didn't answer me, right? Like, it would have been great if like an angel walked into the room, or like, or sometimes God can speak to us in our hearts, but I wasn't getting any of that. There was no like Bible verse that was jumping off the page, but God decided to use Mark. So God, here's my prayer. And it's not like instantly. I didn't pray one morning, sitting on my chair at 7:30 in the morning with my coffee. I was like, God, I'm really just struggling. I need help. And Mark shows up in my house, like, knock, knock, I'm here. It's never like that, right? It takes time. So like months go by of me kind of going through it and leaning on God and praying. And Mark comes in just the right time, tells me about this podcast. I read these books, and you can watch the trajectory of my journal. God rescued me by using Mark. Like, that was a life raft for me. Mark was God's miracle in my life. Mark was God's answer to prayer in my life. And that is part of what we want to talk about, is how can you and I choose to do that? How can we be more involved in what God is doing in the world today? And before you start laying out excuses, I want to just like defeat all those excuses, because God can use you. And it doesn't matter if you're like new to faith, or you're not sure if you even believe in God, or if you've been a Christian for 30 years, or if you doubt whether you know the Bible very well, or if you don't know all the baggage in my history and my past, or all the sin that I'm struggling with. Yeah, that's like the story of the Bible right there, right? Like, we could go all through the characters of the Bible. We don't have time to do that. I mean, we could. You got all day? No? Okay. Trust me then. You could go through all the characters of the Bible, and you would find your issues in there. And I'm not excusing the issues. Like, we're all on the journey to grow together, but God doesn't wait till we're perfect to use us. He perfects us by using us. So allow yourself to be used by God. So I want to get to a certain verse, but before we get to that verse, I have to give you a first verse, okay? So if you're not familiar with the Bible, there's 4 books called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, written about the life of Jesus, that start what Christians call the New Testament, okay? We're going to read a couple passages from that part. So this is John, one of the earliest disciples or followers of Jesus, and he wrote this about Jesus. Jesus said this. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So before we get to where we need to get, we got to start here, right? Like, there's a scripture I want to show you, but it bounces off of this one. So we got to start here. And you might be wondering, like, what is Jesus talking about? What does it mean to walk in darkness? And maybe even some of you might be offended. Like, if I went up to someone, like at Wawa, and I was like, hey, have you been walking in darkness? I don't know if that would go over too well, right? Or if I told them, you don't believe in Jesus, you're walking in darkness. That's just like, okay, it's kind of weird. But Jesus uses this language, so let's talk about it. So if God is, like what the Bible teaches, that God is light, that he is love, that he is peace, that he is joy, that he is life, if God is all those things, so walking with God gives you love and joy and peace and life. Walking without God in our lives, therefore, is the lack of those things. Now, God allows all people to experience those things, but the truest form and the most full form is with him. And that's what Jesus and the writers of the Bible call walking in darkness. It's walking away or without Jesus, away from or without, just trying to go through life on our own. That's what Jesus calls walking in darkness. And so here's the thing that I have experienced. Some people know that they're walking in darkness, and some people don't think they are. So some people are like, I know something's missing from my life. I feel like there's more to life. I feel like that there's more, and I feel a longing in my heart. Or life is so difficult right now, I hope that there's more, right? Like, a lot of people don't start praying until life really gets really difficult. So do you know anybody like that right now in your life? Do you know anybody right now who is starting to have spiritual conversations, who's starting to think maybe there's more to life, or who is really going through a difficult time? Or maybe you're sitting here right now and it's you. Maybe you're feeling that. Like that you hear this and you're like, man, that sounds like what I'm going through right now. Like I'm asking deep questions about God and life, and I'm asking spiritual questions, and I'm getting curious, and it's like I've never really been like this before. Or I've been going through a really hard time. Like there's stuff that only a few people know about in my life, or maybe no one knows about, or I'm carrying such a heavy burden. I feel like I'm walking in darkness. And then there's people who don't know that they're hurting without God, right? There's people who just think that they're fine. And that's where it gets weird and where people have a hard time with Christians because we're saying Jesus is the only way. And they're like, well, that's really judgmental. And we're like, hey, it's his fault, not ours, right? So he said it, I didn't, right? But here's the thing. Like, so when Samuel was little, Samuel was born, he's my son, for those who don't know. He was born lactose intolerant, okay? That was a fact that we did not know for 12 years. It's not that we didn't try, all right? We did. We tried to figure it out a couple times and whatever. So finally we figured it out. But this kid, we basically tortured him for the first 12 years of his life. I mean, I can remember specifically we went on this trip to Ohio, me and him and Elliot, and we were like, okay, here's the hard part is ice cream's also my love language. So it's like, you're going through a hard time, let's get ice cream, Did you win a game? Let's get ice cream. Is it Tuesday? Let's get ice cream, right? Like, it doesn't matter. So I remember going out late at night, and it was like we went to a diner. I don't know, something about milkshakes at diners. They're just better. So I got him this giant malted milkshake, and I was like, eat it, He's like, Dad, it hurts. I was like, no, you must persevere. And we went back to the hotel room, and we were up all night that night. And I remember calling Mandy and being like, I'm freaking out. I hate this. Like, what is this kid's problem? It was my fault. But I didn't know till later. But the point that I'm trying to make is not that just I'm a terrible father, is that some people are hurting and they don't know why yet. Just because you don't think that you need God doesn't mean that you don't need God. See, Jesus is saying everyone is in darkness who doesn't know me. And so even when people think they have their life together, they're like Samuel pre the knowledge of his issues. Because they were still there, weren't they? The issues were still there. We just didn't know how to fix them. And so Jesus is saying something else really radical. He's saying, I am the light that everyone needs. And this is the gospel message. And I just think it's important every time we talk about Jesus, just to reiterate this. Jesus came to solve the problems of humanity that we can't solve on our own. And they start in here. They start with me, and they start with you. Jesus came to offer us the solution to walking in darkness. He died and rose again and ascended into heaven and said, to anyone who would believe in me, I will give you true life. I will give you freedom from shame and bondage and sin. And that's the thing that we can't solve. We can't solve our own darkness. We can't light our own way. We can't fix our own problems. But Jesus says, you don't have to do it on your own. And that's what's radical about Christianity. It's different than all of the religions. Most other religions, you have to earn your way into some sort of state of heaven. And Jesus is the only one who's like, nope, you can't do that, but I did it for you. All you have to do is accept this free gift, which we all love. Who doesn't like getting free gifts? So Jesus is the light of the world. He's the answer to our problems. He's the solution. And then he says this, you are the light of the world. Plot twist, right? He's like, turns it on its head. And you're like, wait a second. When I signed up for this, you said you were the light of the world. And he's like, I know. But now you are. And Jesus is like, I'm the light of the world, and I am going to give that job to you now. Have you ever been in one of those team meetings if you have a job, and you have this great idea, you're so excited to talk about this great idea, and you tell everyone this great idea, and everyone's like, that's a great idea. Why don't you do it? And you're like, no, it wasn't a great idea. It's a terrible idea. No one should do this idea, right? This is Jesus. He says, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deed and glorify your Father in heaven. You are the light of the world. What if you and I could say this? This kind of sounds so, kind of prideful, doesn't it? I am the light. That's why I put God in there, so it just brings you down a notch. I am God's light in my world. Do you think about that ever? I am God's light where I work. Right, Valerie? Yeah, I am God's light where I work. Valerie, am I allowed to talk about you? All right, Valerie's a councilwoman in the state of Delaware, right? She's God's light in that part of her world. Like, how many of you work in the education system? We need light there, don't we? So many children going through so much darkness. We need God's light, don't we? Accountants. I don't know. I'm sure God uses you in some way. Is Andrew still in here? Oh, there he is. Very good. Gotcha. Now I got to think of a soccer story. I told him, I don't have any soccer stories today. So one day I was at practice and an accountant walked by. No, but every relationship you have, like your parents, your kids, your friends, your spouse, like you could be the light in their world. You could be God. Think about who God is, right? You could be God's comfort in their life. You could be God's encouragement in their life. You could be God's strength in their life. You could be God's truth. Like you could be God's wisdom in their life. You could be God's answer to prayer in their life. You don't know what they're praying. We always tell ourselves, I'm sure they got it all together. They don't know, they want to hear what I have to say. They don't need me interjecting. And all the while God, I just wish someone would reach out to me. What if God was like, here's the deal. 90% of the time, I'm not going to move unless you let me use you. What if that was God's deal with humanity? I mean, there are times when God gets so fed up with people not being willing to be used that he uses other things, right? Like there's a story in the Old Testament where he makes a donkey talk because the guy he's trying to work with refuses to listen to him. I mean, if that's what you need, watch out. Jesus says that if these people don't praise me at this time, because people were mad that people were calling him God, it was a whole thing. And he was like, listen, if they don't do this, the rocks will start doing it. I wonder what people thought when he said that. Like, is he joking? I don't think he was, right? I think he was being serious. So you are God's mouthpiece. You are God's hands and feet. You are God's instrument today in the people's lives that you interact with. I just wonder, do you have those lights? Can I get one? I just wonder what it would look like. Oh, great time. Oh, it's not unwrapped. And I don't know how to use it. Oh, there we go. I just wonder, like, this is so cheesy. Listen, I am all about cheese, so I'm sorry if you don't like this, but I'm all about, like, props and things like that to help you remember. I can't open this, though, for sure. Like, if I just was, like, started doing this to people when I walked up to them. No. But like, think about this. If I'm the light of Jesus everywhere I go, how often do I turn it off? Right? Like, am I like this at church and this at home, or this at home and this at work? Or like, for me, what I'm trying to grow into is realize that I can always be this. Whether I'm sitting next to some soccer players, there you go, at a basketball game like I was this week, right? Can I be the light in their life? Is there a moment, like, it's not like, have I told you about Jesus? That's not what I'm talking about. It's being present. It's listening. What are they going through? How can I speak something godly, truthful, encouraging into their life? Can this light be on all the time? What about every conversation you have with your children? Is it an opportunity for you to be the light of Jesus? What about when you go to Wawa? By the way, they have a new special edition coffee, caramel. It is phenomenal. I got it twice yesterday. I'm on my way after church to get some more. Have you had it? Yeah, that's right. It's good. You know, but when I talk to people at Wawa, like, I want to be the light. Like, can you be the light everywhere, or is it just like when you feel like it? What if you took ownership of being God's light in the world that you inhabit? And like, let's make it really practical, which is what I love about Jesus. Look, you might need scissors or a knife or a bomb or something to open that. He says this, you're the light of the world. And this is how he ends it. Okay, you have lights, you don't hide them. Lights, you turn them on, right? You don't turn them off. In the same way, so in the same way that you use lights, keep your light on. That's the point. How? Let your light shine before others. How? That they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So this is what we want to talk about today. Be someone's miracle. Serve them. All right, so we're going to do 3 more the rest of the month of how we can be people's miracles. But this one today, we're going to talk about serving them. So by your good deeds, they will see God. By your good deeds, they will see God. Here's the thing I love about serving is everyone can do it. Do you know the Bible memorized front to back like Kevin? He still can serve. Do you know nothing about the Bible like Kelly? She still can serve. Yes. All right. You're right. I mean, you know, obviously Kelly knows the Bible better than me probably, but like, do you know, are you an introvert? You can find ways to serve. Are you an extrovert? You can find ways to serve. You get the point. I don't need to belabor that. Everyone can do it, okay? Let Jesus prioritize this service. So at the end of Jesus' life, right before he got arrested and crucified, he had a final meal that people call the Last Supper. I like to call it the final meal. Right? He's sitting there with his closest disciples. And here's the deal. They all come in together for dinner. There's no servant there. And what would happen in this, in this society at this time, and they weren't paved streets, so they were walking in mud, and they were sharing roads with animals, and they were walking with like open-toed sandals, so they'd get dirty feet. That's the point. And someone would have to wash their feet because they would kind of recline at the table. So there'd be like feet near the food, near your face, right? That's how they did it. Not my thing, right? But so there was no servant to wash their feet. So you need to understand all 12 disciples and Jesus would have all been in there thinking, well, someone needs to do this. And none of the disciples, I think Jesus waited a second. And then he just like put on this servant towel, got down and washed all the people's feet. And then he said this, do you understand what I've done for you? You call me teacher. You call me Lord. And rightly so. Like, that's the right thing. You got it. You figured it out. For that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Jesus is like, if you want to follow me, you will be a servant. He tells in other places, he says, the greatest among you will be the servant among you. He prioritizes service over like making a name for yourself. He prioritizes service over getting your needs met. Okay? In fact, 2 days before this, he told a story. He told a story. I'm just going to show you part of it. But he told a story to a huge crowd. And he was saying, at the end of time, God's going to divide people into two groups. So the king was the kind of the main character of the story. He said the king will say to those on his right, so he's divided them into a group on his right and a group on his left. Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me. And think about all those. Think about all those. Just read them, right? I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, you came to visit me. And the people will say, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison, go visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And the point is, every time you helped a person who was in need, you actually were helping me. So, to help us understand this, I drew a picture. I really feel like, part of what God has gifted me in is art. So here we go. You like that? Jesus, you, others. And here's what we know. Jesus serves us. He's already served us, okay? He served us by dying on the cross. He serves us by walking with us every day. Jesus tells us that he will never leave us or forsake us. He's with us at every moment. But we can short circuit the point. The point isn't just that he serves us. He means for it to overflow into service to others. But we can just keep it to ourselves. And when we do, we stunt our growth. We limit what God can do in our lives, and we limit what God can do through us. So what God is asking us to do, remember Jesus said, as I have done for you, do for others. I have set you an example. So this was, I forgot that was there. You ready? There's another verse about to come up. Here we go. This is what happens when we do this. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one, go in peace, keep warm and be fed, but does nothing about their physical needs. What good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. Like that. You can have all the faith in the world, but if it doesn't overflow into other people. I remember years ago, I took Mandy to a doctor's appointment. I don't know why I didn't go in. There are two things I remember about this very distinctly. I was excited. Apparently today is all about Wawa. I was excited because on the way, I knew I was going to be in the car. So like a lot of times, I'll bring my computer, I'll work in the car, but I stopped at Wawa on the way and got myself a sandwich. And anybody else love Wawa sandwiches? I mean, so I had and this was probably before I was trying to watch my weight. So it was probably a 10-inch and just everything on it. And so I was like, yes, I'm going to eat this sandwich. I'm so excited. I was waiting. She goes to her doctor's appointment. You wait a little while. If you're like me, you don't open it right away. Let's wait. Let's savor the moment, right? So do a little bit of work. I'm like, all right, it's time. Start to open my sandwich, and I see this guy walking by. And this guy was not doing well. I don't know what was going on, but you could tell. Like, he looked like maybe he had just like gotten out of the emergency room. Maybe he was strung out. He was really hurting. And you know what my first thought was? I hope he doesn't see my sandwich. I'm totally being honest. Because he was like kind of walking close to my car, and I was like, God, you know when you preempt God and you're like, God, don't ask me to give him my sandwich. God, don't you dare. Which probably means what? God's asking you to give him your sandwich. I want to just tell you, like, at this church, we don't celebrate the pastor. We tend to like put the pastor down, all right? I did not give that man my sandwich. I ate every bite of it, and I probably God's not so happy with that part of my life. And the thing that's so silly is I could have gotten myself another sandwich, right? How hard would that have been? But I was like, it was like a purely selfish moment, but it's like a great picture of, I think, what we do. I don't want to help that person. I've got stuff to do. I don't want to help my friend. I've got my own problems. I don't want to call that person. I don't know what to say. I don't care what that line is, but we've all got that line. We've all got that barrier that makes us do this verse, which is like, I will say nice things. Like, I hope people are taken care of. I hope someone's doing that, but we don't ever get any skin in the game. We don't ever get our hands dirty. We don't ever take any risks to serve other people. And I'm not just saying homeless people, like, or poor people. I'm saying anybody, like people in your family. Remember, you are the light every day with everyone you come in. How can you learn to serve every person you meet? And when we do break this line, this is what it looks like. Whew. It kind of looks like a smiley face, doesn't it? Or like an Amazon package. So when it goes from Jesus to us and us to others, it's not just we serve others, but others are drawn to Jesus. Isn't that what he said? By your good deeds, they will do what? Glorify your Father in heaven. So they'll see your good deeds and they'll be connected to Jesus. And bonus, somehow, mysteriously, you and I are also serving Jesus himself, because he said, when you serve one of the least of these, you are serving me. Would you be more motivated to serve people if you knew Jesus was being served by what you were doing? If you saw Jesus on the side of the road, yeah, you'd probably stop. If Jesus was like, man, I'm hungry, you'd be like, I hope he doesn't see my sandwich. You're like, all right, Jesus, will you share it? I'm sure you can turn it into two. We can both have one. All right, that's enough jokes for that sin. My bad. We can feed all of Newark. All right. Okay, so Jesus prioritizes service. You can be someone's miracle. It's easy. We can all do it, okay? We can all do it. This is something everyone can do. Here's a few ideas. Practical help. I don't have the light anymore, but what if you had the light? You have your light on everywhere you go, right? And you're like, how can I be practically helping the people? Because you hear stuff, don't you? Don't you hear like so-and-so's going through this, or so-and-so needs that, or you hear stuff and you're always, our gut instinct is like, well, someone else will probably help them. And what if we just decided to be God's light in that moment? You are light of the world, not me. No, I'm just kidding. You are the light of the world. We are the light of the world. Jesus has done it, and then he's given it to us. Practical help. We have a neighbor across the street who's well into his 80s, and this guy loves to go outside and try to fix things in his property. And we've lived there for 8 years, I think, now. And I think one of the things that God has put on our hearts is to serve this man. And I don't know that we've invited him to church, but like, I don't know that he'll ever come to church or whatever. But it's not always about that. It's about being God's light in the world. You don't know, and I don't know what's happening in his life, what's happening behind the scenes. But we have chopped down trees for him. We have plowed his driveway. We have picked up sticks in his yard. Like, anytime I see like a big project happen a lot of stuff goes wrong on that property for some reason. Anytime I see a big project over there, we go out and help, because that is who we are. Like, it's not, should I do that? It's who we are. Like you're walking in a parking lot and stuff falls out of somebody's cart and starts rolling away. We don't walk by those things. Or you see someone struggling at work. You notice that they're just off their game. How can you help them? Even random acts of kindness can be doing good that draws attention to Jesus. I can remember there was a snowstorm. It doesn't snow here apparently anymore, but it used to. Trust me. And we were driving up I don't know, I live almost on this road. It's a road in Newark. It's like a big road. And so we're driving on this road, and there's this lady, this older lady, and she's got this giant driveway that's a hill, and she's out there with this shovel trying to shovel. You remember this? We drove by that, and we were like momentarily silent. Mandy and I were in the car together, and we're like, well, we have to go back. I mean, like, we saw it. Like, once you saw it, you become accountable. And we're like, well, we aren't those people. We are the light of the world. We are the light. Turn that light. You can put that light away if you want to. Here's the trick. Actually, you can't turn the light off. Do you want to know the dirty little secret? The light's always on, and people are always looking at it. So what you do reflects on the light every time, whether it's good or bad. And that's why the church has so many problems, because people are expecting the light, and we keep messing that up, right? Wow, that was a heavy side note. We'll move right past that, okay? Sorry about that. So we stopped, and like, Mandy went inside and talked to the lady forever because it was a huge driveway. And I got into it. I was like, oh, I'm such a good person. And by the end, I was like, I hate my life. It was like so hard, And I was like, can't wait to get another sandwich. So just kidding. Some of you can be financially generous. And by some of you, I mean all of us can be financially generous, right? Like we all have something we can give. Too little isn't too little. You can be financially generous with people. You can be hospitable. You can be a gift giver. All right, worship team, you guys come up before I go any longer in the list, okay? Like everybody can do this. Like I could just go around the room and I could make you stand up and I could say, here's a way you could serve. Here's a way you could serve. Here's a way I can serve. Serving is something we can all do. So I just want to ask you, how often do you think about serving the people in your life? How often do you think about being God's light in their life? And what if we just started to own that a little bit more? All right, I want to do something even cheesier than what I've already done. I'm going to give you all a keychain light. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but what if everyone in City Light put this on their keychain this month, just this month, and so all the time when you get your keys out, you think, I am the light of the world, okay? You don't have to do it, no pressure. We'll charge you double your tithe if you don't, but no, so you don't have to do it, but put it somewhere if you don't want to put it on your keychain, put it on a desk, put it on a drawer or whatever. There's multiple colors, pick your favorite, whatever. But everywhere you go, at school, if you're in high school, this is something you can do. If you're at work, this is something you can do. If you're at college, this is something you can do. In your home, this is something you can do. We are all the light of the world.